Smoke rises over Gaza's battered horizon, painting a grim silhouette against the breaking dawn. An image that has, for nearly 2 years, become hauntingly routine for millions around the world. But while the global media's gaze remains transfixed by footage of pulverized apartment blocks and shell-scarred streets, the most pivotal battle for Gaza's future is happening far from the chaos of war. It unfolds in the polished, air-conditioned conference halls of Doha, Qatar, where teams of negotiators from Israel and Hamas are locked in a relentless, high-stakes contest. Here, words replace bullets, and every phrase, every proposal, is a potential turning point. The outcome of these indirect negotiations may shape not just the next chapter for Gaza, but the entire political landscape of the Middle East and beyond. To fully grasp the razor's edge on which these talks balance, let's wind the clock back and trace the roots of this crisis. A saga now stretching across almost 24 months. In early October of the year 2022, Hamas launched a daring and devastating attack on Israel, an event that sent shockwaves not only through Israeli society but across the globe. The scale and sophistication of the incursion stunned even seasoned analysts. Israel, reeling from both the human and political cost, unleashed overwhelming military force in response. What began as a shocking escalation quickly metastasized into a protracted, grinding conflict, with neither side able or willing to break the cycle. The human cost has been staggering. Although the fog of war and strict media restrictions make precise numbers elusive, credible estimates suggest that tens of thousands of lives have been lost, including women, children, and the elderly. The devastation extends well beyond the battlefield. Entire families have been wiped out in a single night. Neighborhoods that once echoed with laughter and commerce now exist as little more than piles of twisted rebar and shattered concrete. Gaza, already one of the world's most densely populated strips of land, has been transformed into a landscape of trauma, deprivation, and heartbreak. The humanitarian situation, by every credible account, is catastrophic. More than 2 million civilians, men, women, and children, are now trapped inside Gaza. They are hemmed in by constantly shifting front lines and a political stalemate that shows little sign of resolution. The United Nations and a mosaic of aid organizations have repeatedly sounded the alarm, describing the situation as not just a crisis, but a full-blown catastrophe. Charles Scow, the Deputy Executive Director of the World Food Program, whose career has taken him from the famine-ravaged villages of Somalia to the war-shattered streets of Yemen and Syria, has stated unequivocally, "The situation in Gaza is the worst I have ever witnessed." His words carry the weight of decades of experience and are a chilling reminder of the depths to which this crisis has sunk. Basic necessities, food, clean water, electricity, medicines, have become precious, almost mythical commodities. Hospitals, already stretched to breaking point, operate with dwindling resources. Surgeons perform life-saving operations by the dim glow of flashlights, while parents face the agonizing choice of risking their lives for a bag of flour or watching their children waste away from hunger. According to humanitarian organizations, since the end of May in the year 2025, more than 700 Palestinians have reportedly died simply while trying to access food at humanitarian aid distribution points. A grim testament to the desperation and chaos that now engulfs the Strip. And yet, behind every headline about bombings or blockades, there is another, less visible war, a political struggle whose stakes are every bit as high. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is facing perhaps the most turbulent period of his political career. Domestically, the mood is volatile and deeply divided. On one side, the families of Israeli hostages, held in Gaza for nearly 2 years, gather every week in Tel Aviv's main squares. Their protests, passionate and heartbreakingly persistent, serve as a piercing reminder of the human toll of the conflict. Their message is simple but powerful: bring our loved ones home, whatever it takes. On the other side, Netanyahu faces a powerful bloc of hardliners within his coalition government and among the broader Israeli public. They argue that any deal with Hamas, any compromise at all, represents an unacceptable concession. Their fear is that negotiation now will only encourage further attacks and undermine Israel's long-term security. This internal divide is further complicated by external pressure. Israel's closest allies, including the United States and key European nations, have dramatically increased their calls for a resolution. Human rights groups and the United Nations have accused both sides of committing war crimes and demanded immediate steps to end the suffering. Yet, each proposed compromise seems to founder on the jagged reefs of domestic politics and decades-old mistrust. Meanwhile, the broader Middle East is in a state of flux. The region's alliances and rivalries shift beneath the surface, often in unpredictable ways. In a diplomatic development that would have seemed impossible only a few years ago, Syria and Britain officially restored diplomatic relations in July of the year 2025, signaling a potential reshaping of regional power dynamics. Tensions periodically flare along Israel's borders with Lebanon and Syria, while sporadic violence in the West Bank threatens to ignite a broader conflagration. The specter of a wider regional war, a nightmare scenario for diplomats and generals alike, grows more tangible with every passing week of deadlock. So what, exactly, is preventing a breakthrough in Doha? The core demands of each side remain sharply at odds. According to confidential leaks and expert commentary, Hamas is insisting on three primary conditions: a complete withdrawal of Israeli forces from Gaza to the positions they held before March of the year 2025, a ceasefire lasting for 60 days, and the release of Palestinian prisoners in exchange for the remaining Israeli hostages, some of whom, tragically, are now believed to be dead. Additionally, Hamas demands ironclad guarantees that Israel will not resume military operations during negotiations and calls for the restoration of United Nations-led aid distribution as a precondition for any truce. Israel's response, as articulated by Netanyahu and echoed by his negotiating team, has been firm, even defiant. Any deal that could be interpreted as a victory for Hamas is, in their view, not only politically unacceptable, but deeply dangerous. Israeli officials fear that a perceived concession will embolden not just Hamas, but similar groups across the region, undermining Israel's security for years to come. Scholar Omer Bartov from Brown University has argued that Netanyahu's reluctance to end the war may be driven by more than just national security concerns. According to Bartov, Netanyahu does not want to end the war in Gaza because it could lead to the fall of his government. The coalition that keeps him in power is razor thin, and a peace deal could fracture it beyond repair. With neither side willing to make the first move, the talks in Doha have become a desperate race against time. Every day brings new reports of suffering in Gaza, new protests from the families of Israeli hostages, and new demands from international actors. The negotiators are acutely aware that their decisions will shape not just borders or prisoner lists, but the fate of millions and the stability of the broader region. What are the possible outcomes of these marathon talks? What futures could the next few weeks carve out, not just for Gaza and Israel, but for the entire world? One possible scenario is a fragile breakthrough. If both parties, under immense domestic and international pressure, agree even to a temporary ceasefire, it could mark the beginning of a new phase. Such a truce would allow desperately needed humanitarian aid to flow into Gaza, providing a lifeline to more than 2 million civilians. Medical teams could finally access neighborhoods cut off for months. Aid convoys could move without fear of airstrikes. Families torn apart by conflict could briefly reunite. The psychological impact of even a short pause in violence would be immense, a rare glimmer of hope in an otherwise bleak landscape. For many aid workers and local leaders, the chance to alleviate even a fraction of the suffering is worth every ounce of diplomatic effort. In the past, brief ceasefires have allowed for hostage exchanges and medical evacuations, but these windows have closed as quickly as they opened, often slammed shut by new outbreaks of violence or political brinkmanship. Charles Scow, whose career has spanned some of the world's most harrowing crises, has repeated, "Gaza is the worst humanitarian disaster I have ever witnessed." His words echo the sentiments of countless doctors, teachers, and community organizers who continue to risk their lives on the ground. Yet, a darker scenario looms, one in which compromise proves impossible and the talks collapse. In this case, fighting could not only intensify within Gaza, but spill over into neighboring countries. The Middle East, already bristling with unresolved conflicts and historical grievances, is a tinderbox. The recent normalization of diplomatic ties between Syria and Britain is just one example of how rapidly the region's diplomatic landscape can shift. As the impasse drags on, the risk grows that neighboring states, whether by choice or by accident, could be drawn into a wider war. Analysts warn that groups like Hezbollah in Lebanon, or even state actors such as Iran, could seize the moment to escalate tensions, plunging the region into a multi-front conflict with catastrophic consequences. For Israel, the stakes are both existential and political. Netanyahu's government, already weakened by internal divisions, and mounting public anger, could face collapse if it is seen as weak or indecisive. Weekly protests in Tel Aviv, led by the families of the hostages, are growing in both size and intensity. These families are joined by a broad coalition of civil society organizations, retired military commanders, and even some political rivals. Their argument is clear. No victory is worth the prolonged agony of hostages or the suffering of innocent civilians. On the Palestinian side, Hamas faces its own formidable challenges. The group's leadership must balance the demands of its fighters, who want recognition and security guarantees, with the desperate needs of Gaza's civilian population, struggling to survive amidst bombs and blockades. Every decision is weighed not just as a political calculation, but as a matter of life and death. The memory of previous ceasefires, some of which collapsed in days, hangs heavily over every proposal and counterproposal. External actors and mediators add yet another layer of complexity. Qatar, the host of the current talks, has emerged as a key power broker, leveraging its unique relationships with both Hamas and Western capitals. The United States, under the presidency of Donald Trump, has renewed its push for a deal, seeing an opportunity to reshape America's standing in the region. Meanwhile, Egypt and other regional players shuttle between capitals, relaying messages and testing proposals. Each actor brings its own priorities, red lines, and vision for what a post-war Gaza should look like. But why should this crisis, unfolding thousands of kilometers away, matter to you, the viewer? The reverberations of these negotiations reach far beyond the borders of Gaza or Israel. Every precedent set in Doha will influence how the world approaches future crises, from Ukraine and Sudan to the South China Sea. The methods, compromises, and even failures of these talks will shape how global powers, international organizations, and non-state actors respond to conflicts for years, if not decades, to come. Consider the double-edged power of negotiation. In today's interconnected world, few conflicts remain isolated. The fate of a single enclave can trigger global market fluctuations, spark refugee crises, and reshape military alliances. Understanding the nuances of these negotiations, why some succeed, why others fail, equips us all as global citizens to recognize emerging patterns and advocate for smarter, more humane policies. More than that, this saga is a testament to human resilience. Even as leaders trade barbs and armies exchange fire, thousands of ordinary people, aid workers risking everything to deliver supplies, negotiators working through sleepless nights, families refusing to give up hope, are quietly, persistently changing the future. Their courage rarely makes the headlines, but it forms the true backbone of any lasting peace. Let's look more closely at some of these unsung heroes. Humanitarian convoys, organized by international agencies, continue to roll into Gaza despite the dangers, airstrikes, sniper fire, and unpredictable checkpoints. Doctors perform surgeries by flashlight, improvising with what little equipment remains. Teachers organize makeshift classrooms in bombed-out ruins, determined to give children a sense of normalcy, even as the world falls apart around them. Community leaders carve out safe zones for children, turning basements and abandoned buildings into sanctuaries. These acts of quiet heroism, repeated thousands of times each day, are the seeds from which a better future might one day grow. There are also countless stories of cross-border solidarity. In cities from Amman to Paris, from New York to Kuala Lumpur, communities have mobilized to send food, medical supplies, and moral support. Crowdfunding campaigns, awareness drives, and advocacy rallies have raised not just funds, but global consciousness. This groundswell of empathy and action underscores how interconnected our world has become, and how ordinary people, far from the corridors of power, can shape the global response to crisis. So, we return to our central question. Will these negotiations in Doha finally break the deadlock and open a path to peace? Or are we witnessing the prelude to an even more devastating chapter? The answer remains painfully uncertain. Diplomatic sources report moments of genuine hope, draft agreements, creative proposals. But every advance is matched by a new impasse. The next few days, perhaps even hours, could tip the balance one way or the other, deciding not only the fate of Gaza's 2 million souls, but the stability of the entire Middle East. It is important to recognize a deeper truth that is too often overlooked in mainstream coverage. Negotiations of this scale are not just about legal language or territorial boundaries. They are about the shifting balance of pressure, international outrage, the relentless human cost of war, the calculations of political survival. All of these forces can combine, sometimes in unexpected ways, to create openings for peace. When enough of these vectors align, even the deepest deadlocks can suddenly, astonishingly, crack open. History is replete with examples. Think of the peace process in Northern Ireland, which for decades seemed trapped in a cycle of violence and mistrust, only to break through after a convergence of public pressure, political courage, and external mediation. The Camp David Accords, signed after years of war between Israel and Egypt, seemed impossible until they happened. These moments demonstrate that even the most intractable conflicts can yield to diplomacy, provided the right constellation of factors comes together. For those watching from afar, there are practical lessons to be drawn. Stay informed. Question your assumptions. Remember that the world is shaped not only by leaders and armies, but also by the collective choices, actions, and hopes of millions of ordinary people. In an era dominated by social media and instant communication, the ripple effects of public opinion and grassroots advocacy can reach the highest levels of power. To those seeking to make sense of a rapidly changing world, our advice is simple. Keep watching. Keep asking questions. Never underestimate your own influence. At historic moments like this, knowledge is not just power. It is the fuel for empathy, action, and ultimately, change. If you want to stay ahead of global events and understand the stories shaping our world, make sure to subscribe, like, and share this video, because history is written not in dusty textbooks, but in real time. The insights you gain today will empower you tomorrow. Stay tuned, stay informed, and never underestimate the impact of a single diplomatic breakthrough.